You know why? Because this is New York City. Anything could have happened.
Poor New York. Being such a recognizable city, it's not surprising that it would be the site of some pretty catastrophic events. Be it asteroids raining down on the famous New York skyline, or mutant vampire monsters running amok through Times Square, there have been some pretty interesting ways that the city that never sleeps has been forced to take a permanent nap. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at that very concept, and breaking down some of the most exciting ways that the big city has bit the big one, either in its entirety or just partially. Let's dive right into it. Starting off this list, let's take a look at the final climactic battle from the first Avengers film, which saw the Chitauri army invading Earth and wreaking total havoc in Midtown Manhattan. Luckily, the original 6 Avengers, Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Hawkeye, Black Widow, and Hulk made their big debut as a team and managed to both push back the alien threat and put a stop to Loki's evil plan. Oh, and Iron Man stopped S.H.I.E.L.D. from blowing up the city with a nuke. That would have made things a lot worse, all things considered. Still though, the battle left a pretty major scar on the city, both figuratively and literally, taking millions upon millions of dollars worth of damage and countless lives negatively affected. It even directly led to Adrian Toomes becoming the Vulture, and played a part in the UN introducing the Sokovian Accords. Basically, it was kind of a major moment in Marvel history. Sharknado is an absolutely ridiculous series. Its very premise lends itself to some major absurdity. The second film, the appropriately titled Sharknado 2, the second one, sees Finn and April traveling to New York City in order to promote a book that April wrote about the first Sharknado event. Of course, while they're there, another tornado filled with sharks pops up, which leads to us getting some fantastic shots of shark-based destruction. And this shot of Finn using his flippin' chainsaw to cut a shark in half. Classic Sharknado. Hard to tell exactly how much destruction the Sharknado causes to the city, but it certainly leads to a lot of people getting taken out, so I'd say it definitely qualified to be on this list. The 1998 version of Godzilla may have taken the god out of Godzilla, according to the series' Japanese originators, but it certainly featured some awe-inspiring shots of destruction. The giant mutant lizard caused some crazy damage, including boring a hole through a skyscraper and building a giant nest in Madison Square Garden. Didn't manage to crush Hank Azaria though, despite its best efforts. Altogether, Godzilla probably caused millions, if not billions of dollars worth of damage over the few days that it spent in the Big Apple. And that is not counting the money it must have cost for those giant piles of raw fish the military used to lure it into a trap. A trap that didn't work, by the way. You know what managed to cause even more destruction than a mutant lizard, however? Global warming. At least it did in the day after tomorrow. Massive, sudden climate change caused some serious damage to the city that never sleeps. First is the massive wall of water that flooded large portions of the city, which is bad enough, but then the endless winter set in, which caused New York City to literally be buried under snow and ice. Due to the extreme cold weather front, the city was left completely uninhabitable. There's basically no way that it could be recovered, unless the climate shifts again, allowing the ice to melt. Though based off the things that are established in the flick, that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. While the city is still technically standing in 2007's I Am Legend, I don't think anyone would argue that the city wasn't destroyed by what happens in the film. See, during the film, a mysterious virus is unleashed on mankind, transforming the survivors into twisted, mutated zombie vampire things. All except for Will Smith's Robert Neville, who is somehow immune to the virus. So while the city itself is still there, the people aren't. What's New York City without New Yorkers? Look at the bright side though, at least traffic is a lot better. The dating scene is pretty terrible though. The classic 80s comedy Ghostbusters gave us what might be the most iconic bits of destruction the Big Apple has ever seen. I am, of course, talking about the aftermath of the titular team's encounter with the gigantic Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Now, the giant itself didn't really do much in the way of destruction. It walks down the street and climbs up a building. Not too bad. However, once the Ghostbusters put an end to Gozer, the giant, sugary mascot explodes, covering the city below in ooey, gooey marshmallow. So it doesn't really destroy much in the traditional sense, but can you just imagine the amount of work that would go into cleaning up that mess? That's actually something that they mentioned in the second film, with the city having sued the Ghostbusters for the cost. It would be probably one of the largest, most expensive jobs imaginable. A tasty job. A tasty job. But a job nevertheless. Anyone bring stuff to make s'mores? Alright. Speaking of delicious cleanup jobs, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs gave us one of the most tasty catastrophes in the history of ever. When our hero, Flint, loses control of the food-based weather machine, we see a montage of different locations across the globe getting pelted with food native to that region, including New York City, which is hit with a deluge of hot dogs and bagels. While played for laughs, this would in reality probably be pretty devastating. Giant hot dogs hitting people as they go about their day would certainly put a few of them in the hospital. And can you imagine what kind of vermin that food just laying around would bring? Do you want ants? Because that's how you get ants. Or giant sewer rats. Oh wait, New York already has those. Anyways, the cleanup cost would be astronomical. If you thought cleaning up some sticky marshmallow from a couple of city blocks was bad, imagine an entire city covered in hot dogs and bagels. Yikes. Zack Snyder's Watchmen changed the end of the story a bit, but it still led to some serious destruction of New York City. See, in the comics, Ozymandias unleashes a massive tentacle monster on the city in order to try to unite humanity against a non-existent alien threat, which is pretty wild. The film version, though, instead has Dr. Manhattan being framed for a massive explosion being set off in the city, which levels nearly half of it. The idea is that the world would then unite against Dr. Manhattan, serving basically the same purpose as the aliens. Either way, be it via quote-unquote aliens or Dr. Manhattan, New York still got the raw end of the deal. Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow was a pretty interesting little film, which styled itself off the old film serials from back in the day. And you know what they really loved back in the day? Giant killer robots, just like the ones that completely ravaged New York in the movie. Despite the best efforts of our noble heroes, the robots caused some pretty serious damage to the city, though the action-adventure film has a pretty light tone to it, so it doesn't really linger on the devastation for too long. One of the most iconic scenes in cinema history alludes to the destruction of not just New York City, but pretty much the entire world. I am of course talking about the famous final shot from Planet of the Apes, which revealed a destroyed Statue of Liberty, showing us that this ape planet was actually our own world. The film's sequel, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, went a bit into the actual story of what happened. Basically, the world was destroyed by a nuclear holocaust, which is pretty much to be expected from a post-apocalyptic film released during the Cold War. Either way, it led to ape superiority and humans living in cages. Wish I had a joke, but like, I don't. It's pretty horrific. Good movie though, good movie. Of course, when nukes aren't blowing up the city in our sci-fi films, frickin' aliens are. Independence Day is pretty well known for the shot of the ship blowing up the White House, which is pretty awesome, but there was also the shot of the aliens blowing up a skyscraper in New York, causing a massive fireball to engulf pretty much everything around. We get to hear about the aftermath of this massive explosion, and it isn't good. The entire city is basically decimated, leaving nothing behind but burning embers and ash. Of course, things work out in the end as Will Smith gets to punch one of them square in the face, so you know, give and take. Armageddon gave us a lot. Oil drillers in space? Check. Steve Buscemi riding a nuke like Slim Pickens? Check. A massive chunk of asteroid destroying a massive part of New York City? Check, please. The asteroid managed to do a pretty large amount of damage to the city, easily racking up millions upon millions of dollars in property damage, and more than likely leading to massive loss of life. They say that Michael Bay is all about explosions, and honestly, I cannot personally think of a bigger explosion than an asteroid striking New York. It's at least perhaps the most visually cool looking ones he's ever done. As we said before, 1998's Godzilla left quite a bit of destruction in its wake, but it wasn't the only giant monster to wreck the city. The titular Cloverfield monster also managed to do some pretty massive damage to the city, including ripping the head off of Lady Liberty herself and throwing it to Manhattan. While we don't really know where the monster came from, what we do know is that the damage it caused was so bad that it led to a complete evacuation of the city. And if Cloverfield paradox means anything, it could potentially have caused more than just the destruction of New York City. Oh yeah, this one is global. Speaking of taking destruction global, you know what would leave a pretty big boo-boo on the entire planet, including New York? The world getting bombarded by massive solar flares that pretty much vaporize everything and everyone. That is exactly what we saw in the 2009 science fiction flick starring Nicolas Cage, Knowing. At the end of the film, we see the world get hit by these aforementioned solar flares, which burned away the atmosphere and took out everything on the planet. Don't worry though, the final moments of the film showed us a group of survivors running across an open field on another world. So maybe someday there will be a new New York. Maybe. Wait. This movie doesn't belong here. Writer guy. Writer. Why have you included Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan here? New York doesn't get destroyed in this film. But like half the movie doesn't even take place in the city. It's on a boat on the way to the city. And there was only one shot actually done in New York where Jason was in Times Square. Otherwise it was Vancouver, Canada. But okay, fine. Yeah, Jason Takes Manhattan. While only like 5 people get taken out in the movie, which hardly qualifies for destroying the city, it's indeed a movie. That happened. I guess there's an alarming amount of toxic sewage just laying around in the back alleys that could theoretically lead to people getting super sick if it makes its way into the water supply. So yeah, there you go. Toxic ooze could destroy the city. Not Jason, pollution does. So there you go, happy Mr. Writer guy. Which is your favorite way that New York has been decimated? Were there any that you think are better that we didn't mention? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. While you're down there, why not consider subscribing to ScreenRant for more awesome content just like this? Thanks for watching!